welcome to this panel discussion on the use of digital games, virtual reality, and visualizations for healthcare. I'm the moderator, Adam Blumenthal, connecting here from Rhode Island, USA. I design and produce XR experiences for health and learning with my team at Nucco, a studio of the Unit 9 group. Unit 9 was named by Ad Age as Production Company of the Year for our innovative work in advertising. And my role is to apply the same high design standards and the same user engagement strategies that we use in our work for brands and consumers to our work for learners and patients. I'm also on the faculty of the Computer Science Department at Brown University, where I teach a course called X plus VR, the potential for virtual reality to transform nearly everything. In my class, each student picks a context or a use case and proposes how VR can transform that experience to achieve outcomes that are better or faster or more scalable or otherwise impossible. Many of my students choose topics in health and medicine because, as it turns out, video games and virtual reality experiences can be designed to very effectively educate, diagnose, treat, and affect behavior change related to many different types of health conditions and medical use cases. After decades now of R&D and real product development, there's very strong evidence that games and VR can be effective for things like pain management, mental health diagnoses and treatment, stress reduction, hard skills training like surgical simulations, and soft skills training like practicing good bedside manner. In this session, we're going to talk about some of these types of use cases, and we'll hear about the work of our panelists are doing to treat anxiety, Alzheimer's, ADD, among other conditions, with digital experiences. In many ways, the healthcare industry has been slow to adapt to the needs and demands of consumers, providers, and patients of the digital age. But when it comes to innovative uses of video games and VR, among all fields and industries, I think healthcare is one which has seen some of the most initiatives and the most interesting initiatives where digital experiences are fostering health outcomes that are truly transformative when compared to traditional practices. So on this panel, we're going to talk about what it is about games and immersive media that make them great vehicles for delivering assessment and treatment strategies. So successful, for example, that for the first time ever in June of this year, the US Food and Drug Administration approved a video game to be marketed as a medical treatment. That's Adam's product, Endeavor RX. And in a few minutes, we'll hear more about this major achievement really for all the industry. So with that, let's hear briefly from each of our panelists. We'll have a short introduction about you and your work, and we'll start with Dumeetha, and then Amir, and then Adam.
Hi, I'm Dumeetha Luthra, and I'm the founder of Take Pause, and we've designed a system to reduce anxiety in teenagers. So I used to be a BBC war correspondent. I think you can imagine the death and trauma that I witnessed. I developed PTSD, and to help me cope with it, I started practicing mindfulness. And it felt like I'd been given a superpower. And I wished I'd had that toolkit as a child. And it was really from that wish that Take Pause was born. Now, 4 years on, we have an evidence-based system that prevents, reduces, and tracks teenage anxiety. We've built the system with clinical psychologists and neuroscientists, and we've co-designed the visuals, as you can see, with teenagers. Our system incorporates elements of mindfulness into virtual reality, and then we layer on color therapy, music therapy, and also specific language. And all of this together activates calm in the teenage brain. And we have evidence that shows it works. We've just completed a clinical trial in the pediatric emergency room with 13 to 17-year-olds. The trial results showed that in just 5 minutes, we reduced anxiety by 45%. Here's a video to show you how it works. Hello there, we're delighted to welcome you on board Take Pause. Thank you for flying with us today. We know that waiting to find calm when you're anxious or in pain can be tough, so we're here to help you. Once the headset is on and adjusted for comfort, we're ready to launch. First, select a character, then a location. Before departure, check in with how you're feeling. And then the voyage into guided mindfulness begins. We've designed our system for teenagers, but sometimes we let adults use it too. We've brought in neuroscientists and artists to create worlds which quiet the mind. Upon arrival, you can check in again with how you're feeling, so you can track any changes. We hope you enjoyed flying with Take Pause, and thanks for watching. So now we're raising our first round of funding, and we're talking with hospitals, doctors, and healthcare networks to deploy Take Pause into healthcare settings. Our ultimate goal is to help teenagers find calm, to help them unlock their creativity and their joy. Thank you. And now we'll go over to Amir.
I'm Amir, co-founder and CEO of Virtuleap. Our company sits right at the intersection of the neurosciences with virtual reality, or more specifically, how virtual reality unlocks the neurosciences, and most specifically, to help detect and delay the clinical onset of cognitive illnesses like Alzheimer's disease. The mission behind the company is that current cognitive assessment tools are limited and lacking because screen-based devices fail to track and engage our whole body. Virtual reality is the answer because it's the first digital format to trigger my autonomic nervous system into believing that I'm actually standing on a very, very high precipice, and that my very real phobia of heights is triggered into believing it's real. And so it's not just a cognitive experience, but also an emotional one and an experiential one. Here's a clip of enhanced VR brain training. We've created a library of VR games designed by our neuroscientists to test and train a range of cognitive abilities like the MBAC task or the Stroop test into 3D rendered environments that test and train not just your memory, flexibility, problem solving, and information processing skills, but also your motor control, motor skills, your spatial orientation, and your spatial audio awareness. And we make all of that data accessible through our enterprise platform into the hands of caregivers and healthcare practitioners. The amount of data that we collect is unprecedented. Just 3 minutes of playing our games generates volumetric data sets that combines granular levels of player interaction with rich full body sensory data that, in partnership with companies like Fourth IR and their AI learning tools, we're currently mining with machine learning to create a new digital health marker for the early detection of Alzheimer's disease. And here we go with the original OG himself, Adam Gazzaley.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for having me here. My name is Adam Gazzaley. I am a professor at the University of California in San Francisco, and also the co-founder of Achille Interactive, SenSync, and Jazz Venture Partners. It's a mouthful, but they all actually have something in common. They all use interactive experiences delivered digitally to help improve the human condition. Usually we focus on cognition like attention. I'm just going to frame my comments today with a story, a 12-year story that I'm going to tell very rapidly. I'm trained as a neuroscientist and a neurologist, and I just got frustrated with the lack of tools that we have to treat the neurological and psychiatric conditions that we suffer from globally. And I became interested in the idea that we haven't really capitalized on our understanding of neuroplasticity to really improve processes. We've relied almost solely on molecules as treatments, with this idea, this holy grail, that there's some magic brain pill out there that's going to fix everything for us. And I became interested in, can we create experiences that are a very ancient form of treatment for our brain, like mindfulness and meditation, but to use digital technologies to create closed loop experiences, meaning that all the challenges and reward and the sensory information that you're experiencing are all updated based upon your own data. And so 12 years ago in 2008, I started building my first video game with friends from LucasArts, and we created a game called NeuroRacer that was based upon the work in my lab, showing that there are common neural networks underlying different aspects of cognitive control, like attention and working memory, task switching, multitasking. And the hypothesis was that if we could improve your ability to deal with an incredible amount of information and interference resolution, we would improve your attention outside of the game. And that's what we showed in a paper that we published in Nature in 2013, which showed that we can improve the ability of older adults to pay attention and their short-term memory after 1 month of gameplay. And then over the years, we started a company to help move that invention and that research into the real world as a medical device. And Adam already alluded to the fact that after now 12 years later, that company, Achille Interactive, in over 30 clinical trials, was able to generate the evidence to have a clinical indication approved by the FDA as a Class 2 medical device to treat children with ADHD. So super exciting, a first digital treatment for children ever prescribed by FDA clearance, and the first video game for any clinical condition at all. So super exciting for the hundreds of people that have been involved in this over the decade that we've been working on it. And we'll just pause now and take a look at that video for Endeavor RX.
We'll see if you're up to the task. Now get going. Only capture these little whippersnappers. You're getting it. Wonderful.
So I'm really happy to be here today. Unity has been a part of Achille and Neuroscape and Sync and all of our journeys, and really helped democratize the ability of us to create new therapeutics when we weren't a big, publishing company on our own, or at least not at the time. So I'm really happy to have this discussion and excited to dig in with our co-presenters today. So thanks for having me.
Great, thank you. I have 5 or 6 questions I hope we can get to during the time that we have. We're now going to move into the discussion portion of the panel. Let's start with this one. Adam was just talking about Unity, our hosts for this event. Unity are the makers of a sophisticated video game engine, an authoring platform for rich interactive media experiences. It may be surprising to some people in our audience that games and game-like media, such as VR, have a place in healthcare. So I wonder if you can each talk a bit about the characteristics of video games that you employ in your products. What are some of the game mechanics or the features from games that you found to be effective, and why? Anybody want to start with that?
Well, that's exactly how Take Pause began. I mean, basically it was, okay, how do we give mindfulness to kids in a way they'd want to do it? So it was really, okay, well, let's use the components of games that would work in mindfulness. And virtual reality, of course, immersive, engaging, and it brings it to them in a way that they'd want to do it. So for us, sort of the game engine component of it was absolutely fundamental to the design. But we've also been very careful, like it's very intentional. There's no pass or fail, it's mindfulness.
Yeah, I would add to that. I think it's all about engagement. And so I think when the most promising results happen, it's because in research and so on, and why there's a cognitive benefit when you're playing a game, and then why we say it's a video game. Well, I suppose the ones that are the most intense typically are the ones that are the most compelling, the ones that let you forget that you're sitting in your actual reality. It's why the FDA held a public workshop in March. They're finding that for whatever reasons, that the pain receptors in the brain are dampened when you're in a virtual reality experience, for example, because it's that compelling. And so if we look at from screen-based devices all the way to these immersive devices that allow you to actually feel like you're in another duplicate reality, the parts of ourselves are tricked into believing that reality is true. And I believe that the more compelling that experience actually deceives us, the more that therapeutic effect comes alive. And so I do believe the sensory overload is key.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. Maybe just to add a couple different perspectives from my journey with NeuroRacer and then Endeavor. Video games have lots of assets for this field. One of them being they are perfectly suited to create really very rich, complex interactive experiences. And it's the interactivity that really puts the pressure on the neural networks in a selective way, something that we've never accomplished with a drug before. So just the interactivity that video games are capable of, and the engine that we're using to create it is so rich to build those particular, those specific experiences. But the other aspect, which everyone alluded to, is the fun. And the way, that you can bring on different rewards and different time scales and different outcomes and intrinsic and extrinsic rewards. The complexity of rewards that are built into video game are another really powerful tool outside of just the interactivity. And with that, you could create deep engagement in the moment. And I really believe that to harness the brain's plasticity, it's that depth of engagement that really drives those changes to occur. And then the fun, especially on the long time scale rewards, leads to better compliance. The fact that someone wants to come back to that game because they had some connection with a character in it, or wanted to, return to that world that they just loved. Those elements are just missing from the rest of medicine, where compliance is tragic. Even for life-saving treatments, people often don't take them. So I think that it's the compliance and the depth of engagement are really core to the therapeutic effects of video games as treatments.
And how did you know, any of you, during design and production, that what you were making was going to be liked by your users, was going to be engaging, was going to be fun? Is the industry in a place where we can just trust the best practices and go for it? Or was there some other component to the way you built your products that allowed you to make sure you were on the right path?
So for us, it was very much, it was fundamental, right? Like we co-designed all the visuals with teenagers, with students, because yes, we want them to come back. So that was that was foundational for us.
And we're resting on the shoulders of decades and decades and decades of people who have paved the way. I'm not going to keep on complimenting Adam Gazzaley over here, but listen, now a doctor can prescribe a video game as medicine. Does anyone understand what that means? I was telling them, in the pre-call, it's landing on the moon kind of news. And if it wasn't for this, biblical plague that we're going through, it would have probably got some coverage on, BBC and all these people. And if they're listening to this interview session, they should better cover it now. But we're resting on the shoulders, and Virtuleap would not exist if it wasn't for NoScape, if it wasn't for Italy. It's all a stepping stone and a ladder. And we learned it step by step through their trials and tribulations, leading us to understand what works and what doesn't, and where the potential avenues are for even further advancing it down the road.
Thank you, Amir. Nothing can make me happier than hearing those words. Particularly that you saw inspiration and helped develop what you're doing based upon some of the principles that we've started. That's my dream. No company should exist in isolation. No field is built by a single company. And I advise for so many groups, and I want to see this whole field rise because there's so much need right now. So thank you. In terms of how we achieve the fun, I think one of the things that I did well early is to recognize my own limitations. A lot of scientists that I respect have great ideas, and then they think that they can do it all because they're really smart, and they are really smart. But what's a better approach, I think, is to recognize that you should be bringing together a team of designers and storytellers and artists and musicians and UI experts and give them your passion with science and health, and then listen to what they're saying about how you create engagement and enjoyment, and really communicate with each other. And that's something that I spend a tremendous amount of time trying to instill both at Neuroscape and Achille, in the necessity for communication between professionals from different worlds. Sometimes you do lip service to that. You like stand there and the other person's talking and you're nodding and say, I actually know how to do this. I'm not listening to you. But I think if you can break that down and give each other respect and like just suppress your ego and really learn from each other, then you get to build fun along with something that's impactful. And then, of course, as we were saying, you need to be testing it constantly with your audience, or else you could just go down a bad rabbit hole.
Yeah, so that flows nicely into my next topic, which was about the new kinds of teams that these products require. Healthcare organizations typically don't have user experience designers and copywriters and narrative designers and media producers and coders, and likewise, digital production studios don't have subject matter expertise in these topics. So I'm curious to know, maybe starting with you, Adam, since you just mentioned it, how was it that you figured out the right team composition, or maybe even more importantly, the right way to structure the design and production methodology so everybody had a seat at the table, and maybe teams who had not been accustomed to working together figured out a way to do this effectively?
It's a great question. I wouldn't say I have like a blueprint to how to do that every time. We got lucky, I believe, because when we started, we were friends. And so I just happen to have a lot of friends at LucasArts, like very senior people, like the head art director, Matt Omernick, and Dimitri and EJ. And I just respected them immensely, even though I was a neuroscientist, and it was a mutual respect. And so when we started working together, we just listened to each other and really paid attention to what the other had to offer. And then I think as we kept bringing in more people that didn't know us, they just followed that lead. And then when it went from Neuroscape to Achille, it was like the culture was one of respect and communication. So I think that it's really important when you bring together high functioning professionals from their own fields, that you establish that necessity to really listen to each other and to be willing to make mistakes together. And then the other thing is just diversity of people at the table. As I said, having a storyteller there was something that I pushed for really early on. I'm like, this is about story when it comes right down to it. Sound production, things that often get ignored, especially when it's therapeutic, or, it feels like so noble, you're saving the world, and you're like, that's what's most important. And you forget about all these details that drive the enjoyment of the experience. They get ignored. So I think it's really important to pay attention to what a full stack team looks like, the full breadth of experience that could create something that's really special.
Amir or Dumeetha, want to add anything?
Yeah, well, I totally absolutely agree. It's interdisciplinary to the bone. With virtual reality, we call it VR development hell, because it really is to develop when you're developing 3D rendered environments that have a whole new dimension, an order of magnitude of new areas where you can screw up as a creator or developer. We have we have the limitation of initially starting as a very bootstrapped company. And so we can't afford to have a lot of people of certain profiles that we wish we could have. But first and foremost, an accessibility designer is someone that in a VR team needs to be on board, especially for our games. We have it adapted from the ground up. And I didn't expect this until one of my co-founders just knew it was crucial that we would need to know and have the option for the user to indicate whether they're sitting down or standing up. Are they in a wheelchair? Does the game adapt? How can it adapt? We have to think all those things right from the very beginning of it. And in virtual reality, you have these two types of headsets. It's the fake VR headsets, which are the 3 degrees of freedom headsets. And those are just glorified 360 viewers responsible for all sorts of nausea. And then you have the real VR headsets, which, as the body moves, it's synced with the experience and the content moves. And in those experiences, again, it's a very trialing, complicated situation. If you're in our games, we are always standing in place. And so we limit a lot of those challenges from happening. But we have to have an accessibility designer from the very beginning working side by side with game designers, game developers. And of course, the games themselves are not designed by the game team, but actually neuroscientists or cognitive scientists who develop a roadmap. And then they have to collaborate as those games are implemented in a way that sticks strictly to making sure that these games are as much games as they are scientific instruments that, as Adam alluded to previously, they're all, as far as enhanced VR is concerned, designed as closed loop experiences that plateau according to your maximum cognitive load or difficulty. So it's interdisciplinary to the core. And I suppose as a team gets bigger and bigger, you realize to specialize all of those areas one by one. And I think that the whole overall quality of the product appreciates according to that.
Thanks. Dumeetha, do you want to add anything?
So yes, so my background's journalism, right? Not a clue about tech or science. I just had an idea. And so coming from that, what I was good at and what I am good at is pulling people together and bringing people on board and creating what we need. So here am I, sort of no tech background, no science background, but the team that we've built, like we have Walter Greenleaf, the godfather of medical VR, on board. We've got this fabulous sort of suite of guys. One of them, this sort of C-suite exec from Sesame Street and Disney. And so it's been really interesting sort of bringing all these people together. And of course, yes, my sort of background meant that content and the visuals and the aesthetic beauty was really sort of front and center. And in fact, I remember at the beginning, I had a very specific idea what the company was going to be. And it wasn't going to be a health tech company. And then as it evolved over time and the reception that I got from sort of healthcare experts sort of guided us along this path. And so we've been bringing pediatricians on board and we've been bringing healthcare experts. So it has been a really interesting journey from our perspective in that my goal has been, I know a lot of how to make stuff happen. Now let's bring in the people who can make it happen.
We've mostly been talking about maybe the creative side of games for health, but since a digital health product can do more than just host the interaction between a user and the digital experience, more than just deliver the game. Amir, you just mentioned the idea of a game as a scientific instrument. And so I wonder, can we talk a bit about some of the other important features and functionality that you use to do things like maybe report assessment data or to affect and measure the user's experience after the game?
Yeah, I mean, the whole topic of cognitive assessment and training is kind of has a lot of different viewpoints, now about what it is. We have the term brain training, and that naturally just implies, that maybe something also improves in you with regular use. And there's a lot of, different opinions of what the evidence shows and how promising it might be on one hand and how there's lack of evidence on the other hand, whether if using a neuropsychological assessment tool that's gamified through Unity into this really compelling experience, whether regular usage, aside from giving you a sense of how you score according to all these different, cognitive aspects of yourself. For example, I am horrible when it comes to spatial orientation. My wife will tell you when we go and travel in a town in Europe, I get lost very easily. I just don't know what true north is. And after 10 days, I'm still as bad, and she gets frustrated. But in my gaming scores, you'll see that pathetic caricature as well reflected in there. And so it really does reflect reality, at least from what we can see. But on the other hand, if you regularly use it, from the point of view of enhanced VR, I see it in the same way as if you go to a gym and you go on one of those machines that are testing a certain weight, and you know with that weight you can see where you are in terms of your capacity, but you also know that if you were to regularly use it and increase the difficulty range of those weights, you do grow physical muscle, and we're starting to at least be looking into that area of whether it's the same applies when it comes to cognitive training and longitudinal brain training. And so what we have about 6 studies, clinical studies already planned to begin next year with our partners like the VA healthcare system. And we're validating on the one hand, screening our solution as a VR brain training solution, as how it correlates to anything traditional or standardized, and how it correlates not just in that, but also in how it can offer what we call in the industry transferability or generalization of whatever aspects are being trained there. Does it move over and help you remember your grocery list any better, do your taxes any better, or remember the names at faces at those events any better? So we're looking at those kinds of effects. On the other hand, we're working with a company right now to, as I mentioned earlier, to actually see where the value is in the data, because I would suppose the data that comes from VR brain training and actually is 1 order, if not 2 orders of magnitude higher than any other previous digital platform ever. So there's a lot of value in simply understanding from the point of view of the person, whether they consider themselves an empowered patient or their healthcare practitioner. How can we look into that data and be able to leverage it?
Adam or Dumeetha, to add on?
So in terms of data, I think it's fundamental, right? There's so many use cases for it. So what we're doing, as you may have seen in the video, is we've got an anxiety scale before and an anxiety scale after, and that will go in real time to the doctor. And our ultimate goal is tying it to medical records. And then at the same time, as we develop, the plan is to take pause into schools as well, and then at home. So you've got this 360 visual landscape of an individual's mental health. So it almost becomes a mental health check-in. And I think that's sort of important on 2 fronts. One is that individuals can check how they're feeling and when they're feeling like that, and almost sort of see a cause and effect. Like Tuesdays before maths class, I feel really shitty. Okay, right? So what do I need to do to help me in that situation? And then secondly, of course, the data is going to help develop the personalization and the interactivity of the system. So I think it's fundamental. And then of course, the larger thing is we get insights into teenagers, and through that we can sort of develop a far clearer clinical pathway in general for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I echo those comments. So no need for me to repeat them. Maybe I'll try to add something a little different. We are very interested in the data that's obtained from the gameplay itself, being used to update the challenges and supply information about how the person's changing, and then use cognitive assessments, as Amir was saying, is an incredible opportunity of this type of technology. But the other thing that I've been very fascinated with is the role of multimodal biosensing. So tools and sensors that capture aspects of your physiology or brain activity that then can be visualized and either used to help create real-time diagnostic tools or help someone understand their own physiology or brain, even in real time, or a therapist. And this is another use of Unity that is sort of a unique one. We have one example we could show you today. It's something known as the glass brain. I've been working on it for many years now. If we pull up that video, or I could talk over it. So what you're looking at here is my brain. It's a combination of both MRI and EEG. The MRI is sort of the scaffolding. Those golden fibers are known as the white matter that connect different brain areas, and the violet is the cortex of the brain. And then those colored lights that you're seeing is real-time processing of high-density EEG recording, which is essentially showing the rhythms of my brain, the electrical activity. And so in real time, there's multiple processing steps going on for it transformation and artifact correction, and this process known as multivariate Granger causality, which is letting us look at a computational model of how different brain areas are interacting in real time. So again, this is real visualization. Obviously, it's not happening in real time now, but if I was wearing a cap now, it would be. And this is all in Unity and allows us, just like any other 3D assets, to fly into the brain as you're seeing now. And this could be done with any aspect of physiology. So I'm really excited about this form of data and how, in addition to the beauty of seeing your own physiology, which is certainly a plus side, how this data can then be fed into interactive experiences like virtual reality, like Amir's talking about, to allow you to essentially play a video game of your own brain. So that's a little bit of a futuristic idea, but it is possible, and I think it's a fun thing to think about, to bring these different worlds of visualization and therapeutics and diagnostics together.
And is that on your roadmap, Adam? The idea of gamifying the real-time brain visualization?
Oh yeah, we've done a little bit with that, but that is where we're heading, and it's even more fun to do it in VR. Putting on a headset, having your MRI done beforehand, so you have all that pre-processing and then all the real-time processing, and then putting on a head-mounted display and flying into your own brain, watching itself, is definitely something that I encourage everyone to do if possible, and to be able to then gamify that and create almost like a new era of neurofeedback is I think it's really possible and has real exciting therapeutic potential, and that is on our roadmap. Excellent.
Let's take this for a minute into current events and talk about the impact of coronavirus on our field. I'm interested to know if any of you have experienced maybe increased short-term demand for this kind of work as organizations are scrambling to provide services in new ways, and also what, if anything, does the pandemic do to increase interest or even demand for new digital form factors?
I mean, it's accelerated everything. It's the only silver lining there is of what's been happening for digital therapeutics in general. As far as VR is concerned, anything that causes, that you can use for teleconference calls or collaboration, trainings across the board for there. But then from the health side of things, VR fitness applications have been really in demand. I think Facebook's Oculus has been rightly timed with their new headset that's $100 cheaper. Now it's $300, and it's going to be released, I guess, in a week and a half. And and then you have new headsets that are coming out perfectly timed with eye tracking embedded. Maybe not EEG, but I bet you that will be the next generation. And you have all these things really, really well timed. But in terms of stakeholders, regulatory bodies greasing the wheels for digital therapeutics, I do think that's going to continue to happen. In Europe, in countries like Germany, their DIGA system, which is a correlate, a counter to the FDA, they're even more lax in being able to help digital therapeutics kind of get through that process and become a reimbursable solution. But as far as I'm concerned, the whole market has been accelerated in every way, in every aspect, and also in convincing a lot of stubborn minds, making them a little bit more malleable to joining the good side of this type of industry that's really been having a hard time for the last decade or so.
What have you noticed, Adam?
Well, I mean, I agree with all those things. The appetite for digital technology that doesn't have human interaction is so clear right now. It's so relevant and timely. I see that from a different perspective too, because I'm a physician, work at UCSF, and I see docs that are so non-tech forward that never embraced anything now are saying, I love telehealth. Why would I even open up my clinic again? This is amazing. So it definitely has opened people's eyes out of necessity. And now they're like, oh, this is actually pretty amazing. But the other thing that I want to mention is the need is greater too for a lot of the solutions that we're all working on. I always think about, even from the first days, I thought about this pandemic having like three waves. The first one, and three crisis waves. The first one was the obvious, the respiratory health crisis, which was, just right there, hospitalizations, deaths. The second one was the economic crisis, which didn't lag very far behind it and was still obviously suffering both of those. But the third is the mental health implications are massive and growing, and I believe, are going to last longer than the other two crises. And we see the role of stress in worsening everything from depression, anxiety, sleep problems, attention deficits, especially in children and seniors who are isolated. So there's two forces going on. There's the recognition that digital technology is accessible and can get to people in a way that you might not be able to get to them or not want to have a face-to-face interaction. And then the other is the need for mental health solutions, which was already so high, is higher. So I think that it is, like Amir said, a silver lining in a really tragic situation, and one that we should embrace.
Anything to add, Dumeetha?
Yes, well, echo everything you guys said. Yeah, there's definitely an increased demand. There's definitely an increased interest. And also there is a step away from that sort of default, well, we want to get kids off their devices. Everyone's accepting that technology is here to stay. And that sort of slight bit of friction has gone away, where people are like, okay, how do we actually help them on their devices? So that's been this really great leap forward in that regards. And then, of course, sort of the statistics. Mental Health America actually has a sort of website where you can do screeners, and their most recent screener showed that anxiety in teenagers, 80% of those who got screened were suffering moderate to severe anxiety. The CDC also said that teenagers are more susceptible to what's going on now and at higher risk of addiction and substance abuse. So there's definitely, as you said, Adam, this spike that's coming, right? And as kids go back to school, that's definitely going to show up far more clearly. And so I think in that regards, there is less friction to introducing these, both in terms of healthcare and also sort of on a wider level. Technology is no longer the demon, it's kind of the angel.
So we now have maybe a couple decades of scholarship and evidence that suggests that these methods, games and immersive media, work. We even have some best practices for design in some areas that can be applied from one product to another. We have our first FDA clearance. If we consider the big health companies of the world as potential customers or buyers of these products, are they investing in games or VR now? Are they ready, or is there something else they're waiting for before these kinds of tools become much more common? Who wants to start with that one? Adam?
Yeah, we've had, Achille has had investments from medical, device investors and healthcare investors from the very beginning. I mean, it took a while. It wasn't right out of the gate, but we've had that support. So it's there. I believe that the industry as a whole, the global healthcare industry, recognizes, especially when it comes to the brain and mind, and we've been focusing on that. I mean, obviously it goes way beyond that, but there's been the recognition that we just have not done very well with conventional treatments. And we've spent too much time building this silo around pills as like the savior. And that is well recognized. It's well recognized by doctors and patients and regulatory agencies, and it's well recognized by pharmaceutical companies themselves. And so there is an appetite for something new. I am proud of what we've done with the FDA approval. I believe it is a big milestone, but it is by far the last one that's going to really change this field in a way that's going to be truly sustaining. The next big steps for Achille and for the field are to show the appetite in the market with actual revenue and data, and that fact that doctors actually do prescribe and parents do use it and they see real world benefits. And then insurance reimbursement, right? That's the one, right? Like, and it always lags behind FDA approval for any device or drug. So it's not unusual that we don't have that coming out of the gate, but investors want to see that, and I understand why. It is very, very important for accessibility of any treatment, you know, and equity issues to be able to have that. So that's the other big thing that we're waiting for.
Well, that was a very fast 45 minutes. So I'll close this up now. One of the things I've noticed about this field, which is very different than other sectors that I've worked in, is the collaborative spirit, the willingness to share and compare notes. And there's a real interest, I think, among many of us to work together to elevate the field. Adam earlier referred to, not in these words, but sort of the notion that a rising tide lifts all boats. And it's very much at play, I think, among the practitioners in games and VR for health. So thank you very much, Dumeetha, Amir, and Adam, for sharing your experiences. Thanks to Unity for the event and also for the kinds of breakthroughs that your product makes possible. And thank you to all of you watching. Be well.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.